Camera, 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 headphones, and most importantly, coffee. Roll the intro. Hey guys, it's Noel and this is Wheezy Reviews, and today I'm going to be taking another look at AKG's new range of studio monitoring headphones. This is the AKG K371 and the AKG K361. Now first, before I start, I'm sure many of you have seen my video regarding the quality control issues with the AKG K371. And I've got a bit of an update on that. So AKG saw my video and they reached out to me to say that they were very concerned about what they saw, quite shocked. They were quite apologetic with me and they wanted to work with me to resolve the issue. I gave them all the information, photographs. They've seen the video. They knew what was going on. So what they've told me is that they've launched an internal investigation to find out what's going on in the factory, to address any quality control issues that they've got there. And they told me that they're taking this extremely seriously. Now, at this point, I know I'm not the only person that's had any problems. There's a few commenters on my videos, as well as on Reddit and a few other forums. I've seen people complaining of the same issues that I've had, including weird sounds and the ear cups loosening off and things like that. And these are also seen globally, so it's by no means a local issue or anything like that. So obviously, it's very good that they're investigating this and they're going to sort the problem out, and hopefully they can get it sorted out, and this will be just a blip of early production runs, and everything will be fine from here out. Now, I've been talking to the global product lead at Harman, and he has kindly sent me across a new pair of K371s, which he said he personally inspected himself. So thank you very much for that. These are in excellent condition. Everything seems to be completely fine as far as I can see with these, and they sound absolutely fantastic. So hopefully these will hold up and everything's going to be fine from here out with regards to my issues. Now, of course, now that I have a new pair of K371s, I can now do a head-to-head with the K371s and the K361s. And a few things I said in my K361 review I was a little bit hesitant about because I didn't have both pairs in my hands at the time. And some of that is still completely correct, and I might revise a little bit of what I've said, but largely I think they're very similar headphones, and let's just get into that now. So first up, they both seem to have the same driver, or at least a variant of the same driver. So they're both 50mm. They both have the same sensitivity, the same impedance. They're both ridiculously easy to drive and pretty much drive them off of anything. On my O2, I don't have that turned up past maybe 9 o'clock before it is way too loud for these headphones. It's been suggested, I think Metal571 said that the ones on the K371 might be titanium coated, and that might be the difference. So let's look at the physical differences then, and I'll start with the headband. So we have the K371 on the left and the K361 on the right, and with the K371 you have this kind of leatherette sort of texture, but it's not leather, it's a kind of like a rubbery material. And on the K361 this is a flat texture plastic, kind of feels a bit like a soft touch, and they both have the AKG logo embossed in the top. Now, I don't think that the K361 looks bad. I think this looks really good by itself, but certainly the K371 has that more premium quality to it. Looking at the headband padding, I think maybe the K371 has a slightly deeper, plusher padding, but there's not much in it, to be honest. And well, the K361 is considerably lighter than the K371. Either way, neither of them are heavy headphones. I think purely on the weight alone, the K361 is more comfortable. Another reason why they're more comfortable is out of the box, the clamping force isn't quite as high as on the K371. And that's something I actually expect to give after a little while. So I'm sure once you've broken in the K371s, they're going to be just as comfortable as the K361s when it comes to clamping force. But the K361s are lighter. That coupled with the lower clamping force out of the box, the K361 are the more comfortable headphone. Oh yeah, that's good coffee. So looking at the ear cup yokes then, on the K371, they're made of metal and they have this gunmetal finish. On the K361, they're plastic. I don't really think that makes much difference personally. In fact, I quite like the ones on the K361. They're a little bit stiffer to operate, and thus they stay in position a lot easier than the K371s, which do kind of adjust super easy. But, you know, they both fold up in the exact same way. They both adjust in the same way, just one's metal and one's plastic. That's a real difference between them. Some other sort of premium features that the K371 has is this logo is a little bit more intricate. It's cut into this plastic disc and lined with a metallic silver. You can see that reflecting there. The same goes for this logo here. And on the K361, this logo is printed on, and it's printed on here as well. So that's really just kind of like a premium feature that the K371 has, if that's the sort of thing that you're into. One really significant difference between the two is that the K371 has a mini XLR connector, and the K361 has a 2.5mm twist to lock. Now, this is a similar 2.5mm twist to lock as the Sennheiser HD598 and the Audio-Technica M50X, for example. However, as I said in my K361 review, those cables are not compatible with each other. So finding an aftermarket cable for the K361 might be quite difficult, whereas finding an aftermarket cable for the K371 with its mini XLR should be really easy. You know, this is going to be the same cable that's on a lot of other AKG headphones. It's also the same cable that's on the Beyerdynamic DT1990 Pro, and I use that particular cable, the coiled cable, interchangeably between those two headphones, so I can switch between those and these whenever I want, just by disconnecting here. And that kind of brings me on to the cables. With the K361, you do get a 1.2 meter straight cable and a 3 meter straight cable. But with the K371, you also get a coiled cable. Now, like I said in my K371 review, which actually, if you haven't seen it, if you click up here, you can see that. I did state that I wasn't a fan of that particular coiled cable because it was a bit stiff and a bit plasticky. But the fact that this has a mini XLR means that I can easily replace the cable, and it's no big deal. Whereas with the 2.5mm twister lock that's on the K361, that's not really an option. Now, ear pads are the exact same between both headphones. They're both nice and deep and plush and super comfortable for what would be a monitoring headphone. They're nice and spacious. Really no complaints about these ear pads whatsoever. And the back of the ear cups themselves, they look very, very similar between the two headphones. However, the edges of the ear cups, if you can see on the K361, they have this polished, shiny lip to them that the K371 doesn't have, which I think is quite surprising considering the K371's going for the more premium look and feel. This shiny lip here actually looks quite nice on the K361s. Overall, both appearance-wise and feel of these headphones, I actually think that they're both really nice. I really like the K361 in the way that it's built. And whilst it certainly feels like it's made slightly cheaper than the K371, it doesn't feel bad. I really like it. But when it comes to external features and overall quality feel of the headphone, the K371 does kind of edge it out over the K361. So let's move on to sound, because that's the bit that most people are probably interested in. In my previous reviews, I stated that the K361 is an overall brighter headphone, and I stated that it might actually sound a little bit hollow in comparison to the K371. And I'm going to stand by that, because I do think it does sound a bit hollow. I said I was hesitant to say it sounded hollow, but putting them back to back, and you'll see what I mean in a minute. I'm going to go into a bit more detail about that. And also, I said that I didn't notice significant difference in the bass between the K371 and the K361, which is at odds to what I've heard from a few other people online. And I also stick by that statement. And again, I'll go into that in just a moment. Something else that I said is that I didn't think that there was that much difference between both headphones. And I kind of still stand by that, and I kind of disagree a little bit. So I might revise that a tiny bit. They both overall have a very similar sound, but in fact, let's just get into it. Now, in almost all tracks that I've listened to, the K371 has a much thicker, warmer, more rounded, more full, more rich, more warm. You see where I'm going with this? The K361 kind of sounds a bit bright and a bit hollow. Just adjust my IEMs. So I'm wearing in-ear monitors as monitors. These are the Tin Hi-Fi T4s. I'm going to have a review of these coming up. So let me bring up the frequency charts, because I think this really explains best what I'm getting at with these, is that I don't think there's a significant difference in the bass between both of these headphones. Yes, the K361 rolls off a bit sooner than the K371 in the sub-bass. So when it comes to bass extension, the K371 has it. Although, as I said in my K361 review, I don't think that frequencies below 50 Hz are that audible. If you're listening to really sub-bass heavy music, Yeah, you might notice a difference. You might. I don't really think it's that audible in most music. And maybe that's just me, or maybe that's, most people feel that way. But sub bass is not something I find particularly noticeable on any headphone, to be quite honest. In fact, the only headphone that I've really noticed any significant amount of sub bass on was the HE4XX, again, review up here, after I'd EQ'd the bass up and heard it. That headphone had a superb bass response after EQ. And most other headphones, you can't really hear the sub bass. I mean, I don't think it's that obvious. However, they both have a very similar performance in the sort of mid and upper bass region. They're both very close to each other when it comes to that. And thus, the actual real differences in the audible bass between these two headphones isn't that big. Now, I think the reason why a lot of people have stated that the K361 is less bassy is not really because of its bass performance, but because of its lower mids. I think this region here between 200 and so it's about 204 to 500 hertz. You have this sort of 2 dB recess in the K361 that you don't have in the K371. And I think that's what's responsible for making it the bass sound a little bit hollow, and them overall having a much less warm sound signature than the K371. Like this area here is kind of like the backing for all of it's what gives a track its warmth, and the K371 has it. It's all there. You have this big, full and round sound to any track, whereas the K361 while it has clarity and it has detail, it just doesn't have body. Now, another significant difference is in the upper mid-range, and on the K361 you can see it's a bit more forwards than the K371. There's not a huge difference in it, and the K371 does rise up a little bit. These charts are MiniDSP EARS, so the usual disclaimer about that. If you want to see some accurate charts, Oratory 1990 from Reddit has done them. They're not hugely different to these. The overall shape, which is what we're looking at here, the overall shape of these graphs. If you want to see the most accurate graphs, go and see his. Again, I mean, on his, you can see that the sub bass rolls off a lot more than my graphs show. However, both his graphs and mine do show that recession in the lower mids, and they do show that emphasis in the upper mids on the K361. Now, when it comes to vocalists, I think they both perform really, really well when it comes to vocals. If anything, the K361 sometimes can be a bit shouty, but whether it's male vocals, female vocals, they both have a very, very good vocal performance. And I think it depends on the vocalist, whether they're more forwards and more sweet on the K361 or the K371. They both did a very fantastic job. And as well, let's look at the treble. The treble is a little bit more forwards on the K361 in places. They're both kind of similar, but there are a couple of peaks on the K361 that make it a bit brighter on some tracks. Now, the problem is the combination of the recession in the low mids and the emphasis in the high mids and some areas of the treble makes the K361 a bit brighter in places. So things like synth lead and cymbals and stuff like that are going to be a lot more punchy, maybe even toms and snares, a lot more punchy on the K361 than on the K371. That's not to say that they aren't present and punchy and sweet on the K371. It's just that the 361, it's a lot more present, and because you don't have the fullness of the low mids backing it all up, it's just a little bit more obvious. Now, I don't really think that that's a problem. I think that for some people, that's exactly the sound signature they're looking for, and for certain tracking duties, that might be perfect versus the K371. But I think overall, the K371 has a much more balanced sound signature. It's a bit more what I would consider to be neutral. It's a bit closer to the Harman target. And for my personal preference, I think that the K371 sounds much better. So let's talk about reference tracks. Broken by Sleater Kinney. Sleater Kinney is one of the greatest female rock bands to come out of the 90s. If you don't know them, just go and listen. They're fantastic. And this is off their latest album. Broken is kind of like this piano ballad. It has this big, full, grand piano sound. It's really warm and reverberated. Incredible fullness to the piano, atmospheric, and the vocals are just almost haunting. And on the K371, they sound superb. The K361, on the other hand, just lacked some of the energy. It lacked some of the warmth and the fullness and the body. A grand piano is big and present and just fills a room. And you just don't get that on the K361. That's not to say that it sounded bad on the K361. It really did sound good. It just sounded better on the K371. Polaris by Deadmau5, that's another one that I use quite often as an example. It sounds thick and warm and creamy and lush and rich and all of those things that the K361 doesn't sound. There's an incredible amount of clarity on the K361, just like there is on the K371. It's just it doesn't have the same amount of body and thickness and fullness and well, musicality, to use an audiophile term. That's the second video in a row that I've used the term musical or musicality, so apparently I'm going down the rabbit hole now. I have another track in my reference tracks that I use that I think really illustrates my point about the bass response of both of these headphones, and that's Deep Jungle Walk by Asterix. It's a techno track. It has this really big bass line, and it's your typical techno track. I think it's more of a psytrance or techno kind of thing. Anyway, I've written 2 words for both headphones. Big bass, that's it. Because that really just describes both headphones. I mean, maybe I could say that the K371 was a tiny bit more bassy, but the difference between the two is just not significant. Yes, the K371 has a better sub-bass response, it has more extension, but frankly, when you've got the whole rest of the track in the mix, it's hardly audible. The actual meat of the bass between both of these headphones, the actual audible section of the bass, is about the same between both headphones. Because that track isn't particularly strong in the mids, it does have some bright psychedelic parts to it. Those are just as present on both headphones. The K361 is a brighter headphone. The K371, like I said, generally tends to sound a bit warmer. On that track, they're both very, very similar to each other. And this goes back to what I said with my K361 review about how very similar they are to each other. I think a lot of that's going to be track dependent. So it depends on the type of music that you listen to. If mids aren't a strong point in the music you listen to, you probably won't notice that much difference between both headphones. However, if mids are important to you, I think that the K371 is more neutral when it comes to its mids than the K361. However, if you have specific requirements for the mids in your headphones, maybe it's personal preference or maybe it's for certain tracking duties, if you want something that has a cutaway in the low mids and an emphasis in the upper mids, then the K361 is going to be perfect for you. So which one am I going to choose? And I said before that I'm probably going to keep both, and I probably will keep both. But for the last couple of weeks, while I haven't had a K371, I've been using the K361, and I've been using them for video editing. And then I've been putting them back on the side, and I've been grabbing my DT770 Pros because I find them much more enjoyable for day-to-day listening. I actually EQ my DT770 Pros, it's a 250 ohm version. I EQ them using one of Oratory 1990's profiles for Equalizer APO. In fact, I actually use he has 2 for the DT770 250 ohm. He has one for new pads and one for old pads. I'm using the one for old pads. Anyway, I've been using my DT770 Pros almost exclusively and then grabbing the K361s when it comes to video editing. Now I've got the K371s. I find that they're good for video editing and they're good for general listening. They're good for a lot of things. In fact, they're one of the most well-rounded headphones I've ever heard, for a closed back at least. I mean, there are a lot of headphones out there that after a bit of EQ can be absolutely incredible, but out of the box with no EQ, for this headphone to sound as good as it does, they're simply just astounding. So out of these 2 headphones then, for me, the K371 is the better of the 2 headphones. It is the more neutral headphone by Harman standards. It's my preference. For me, the K371 is almost perfect when it comes to a closed back, whereas the K361 is kind of, it just lacks something. It's just a tiny bit boring, to be quite honest. Like I said, this is going to be subjective and personal preference for a lot of people. So for me, the winner, the verdict is the K371. K371 is the better headphone in every way, as far as I'm concerned. But that's not to say that the K361 is a bad headphone. I think it's a really fantastic headphone. And whilst I have said before that these headphones are very, very similar to each other, and look at them, they are very, very similar to each other. in many, many ways, but the small flavor differences between each one adds up to fairly large differences, really. Now that I have them both in my hands and I've been able to listen to them back to back, there's really no question for me. It's the K371. Right, so I think that wraps up this video. Do you have a preference between these two headphones? Let me know down in the comments. And also, if you'd like to see me put either of these two headphones against something else, something like the DT770 Pro, for example, then let me know. Although I think I mostly did that in the individual reviews for those videos. And if you haven't seen the individual reviews for either of these headphones, just go ahead and click up here and you'll be able to see that. Right, that's going to be it from me then. I hope you found this video interesting and informative. If you did, then give me the thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, then perhaps consider smashing that red button down there. I'm going to have a lot more content like this coming out soon. And as always, thank you so much for watching. And until next time, have a good one.